The level of discussion on YouTube regarding the nature of God has reached a boiling point, with each side accusing each other of assuming their beliefs before they read the text. The following video will give us an example of such rhetorical, irrelevant stone throwing that takes place on a regular basis.
What does that mean for us? Well, what we need to do is interpret the Old Testament in light of, the nature of God in the Old Testament in light of what we find in the New Testament. Now, there are glimpses of the Trinity. Absolutely there are. In the Old Testament, Genesis 18 is a very good example of that, because these three messengers, or it doesn't say angels, it says messengers, and these three speak as though they are one, and Abraham speaks to them like they are one person, so we see glimpses of the Trinity already in the Old Testament, but it becomes fully revealed to us in the New Testament. So, Bandit Mafia has violated a principle of Bible study. He has not even gone into the New Testament to tell us why he believes his Unitarian position. He assumes it.
Making the argument that Unitarians assume their position really gets us nowhere. It poisons the well of discussion. Instead of poisoning the well of discussion, why don't we raise the level of discussion? And we can do this by looking at the evidence each side presents. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to look at your evidence if you're willing to look at mine. I'm not interested in pointing fingers. I'm not interested in saying that you assume your arguments, because that gets us nowhere. My evidence, my level of foundation as a Christian comes from the Bible. When I became a Christian, I read starting from the book of Genesis, and I read the Hebrew Bible, and then I got to the New Testament. The Hebrew Bible gave me a level of foundation of who the nature of God was, his interactions with the Jews and with other angelic beings. I didn't start from zero. When Jesus came on the scene, he was Jewish. The early apostles were Jewish. Therefore, I describe myself as a Judeo-Christian. But notice the following point. Dr. William Lane Craig, in a debate, makes the following statement regarding the Trinity in light of the Hebrew Scriptures.
And therefore, let's look at the Bible itself. That's a fair question. Bill, how would you respond to that? It seems to me, it comes down to the question of, is the New Testament trustworthy? Does it contradict, though, what the Old Testament is saying? I think that's exactly right, Lee. We're coming at this question from two different sets of Scripture, or holy inspired writings. And I would agree with Tovia that if you approach this question simply on the basis of the Hebrew Bible, or what we would call the Old Testament, one wouldn't come to believe that God is a Trinity. But if you approach this from the writings of the New Testament, which I believe are equally inspired by God, then the doctrine of the Trinity is taught there. And so I think it will depend on which Scriptures you look at to see whether or not God is a Trinity.
Dr. William Lane Craig is a respected Trinitarian among the evangelical community, and his conclusion regarding the teachings of the Hebrew Bible in relation to the Trinity, he simply stated that it's not there, it's not found. So when I look back, and when I look at the early Jews, and the hundreds of years that they had with their God, and when I meditate on the fact that Jesus himself was Jewish and the apostles were Jewish, I start with Judaism as a foundation for my faith. That's why I am a Judeo-Christian. So therefore, if the Jews did not believe in a triune God, why would I believe in one? Why would the early apostles believe in one? Unless they had clear evidence to prove otherwise. And that is what I want to raise a discussion to. Simply looking at evidence.